The Beginning After the End is a series that is incredibly dear to my heart. It's one of the first Webtoon I've ever read, owed in large part to the fact that it started its run in 2018, just around the first time I started getting into webcomics. I've been keeping up to date with the series ever since, coming back every few months to catch up, often reading through the entire series from the start just to experience the whole thing again in its entirety. That's why I was so incredibly excited when The Beginning After the End was announced to have its own anime adaptation. Especially after the success of Solo Leveling's transition to anime form, I was really excited to see the story get the show it deserves, especially because, in my opinion, The Beginning After the End is one of the best isekai stories to have ever been made. And unfortunately, it's bad. Really, really bad. Bad enough that many fans of the series are calling for a do-over and for the show to be readapted in a way that's more satisfactory. Now, there are some obvious things that the show has done poorly, a lot of which have been addressed countless different times by now, but there are other issues with this adaptation that I think are going unnoticed because of the sheer number of issues with the show. While it is really sad to see how the source material was handled, I think that this show is a fascinating example of how not to adapt a beloved series. So let's dive in and figure out how The Beginning After the End falls so flat. So first on the docket, let's just get this out of the way. The animation of the show is really not great. Everyone and their mom has been talking about how rough everything looks and how, honestly, a lot of scenes are just not animated at all. Going in, I thought that this was just the internet being mean and critical, like there's no way a high-profile adaptation in 2025 looks that bad. But I was wrong. Most, if not all, of the fight scenes are pretty much represented by a couple frames of animation, with the camera slowly panning across them to give the illusion of motion. The worst part is that I'm not really watching this show for the fight scenes. I was never expecting solo-level quality of animation, especially for the action. At least for me personally, I don't think that the early fights of the webtoon need super crazy animation. The problem here is that not only did they fail to make the fight scenes impressive or dynamic, they also just made them look flat out bad, to the point where even though I don't think the fight scenes are everything with the show, I still feel really rough seeing how poorly they were handled. It's not even bad in an unobtrusive and forgettable way, it's in your face and terrible. When I watched the show and got to the big fight at the end of episode 1, I could actually start counting the frames on 2 hands without much difficulty. And to make things worse, they try to use 3D effects to supplement the lack of hand-drawn animation for the show, and it makes it feel even worse. These effects look cool when Ufotable did them like 15 years ago, but now they just feel lazy and incongruous with the rest of the show's style. And unfortunately, this quality, or lack therein, is extended to the rest of the show, not just the fight scenes. The art style is super generic and really doesn't do these characters any favors. And I think that's really a shame considering the source material is adapting. Going back to the original webcomic, the art of the first few chapters doesn't hold up all that well. The team was really small and working on a fledgling series, so it's very understandable why things look the way they do. But even with the kind of strange paneling and pretty okay art, the style really brings everything together. The characters just look really cozy and at home in the world, and they have a lot of charm and personality in the ways they are drawn. Every little moment and expression adds a lot of flavor to what would normally be just kind of average looking character design. Since the anime doesn't even try to go for this in a lot of respects, it makes the characters feel so flat and lifeless sometimes. Like this could just be any other isekai with a fantasy world and a doting mom and a strong warrior dad. I think that's probably the biggest shame about the quality of this entire adaptation. The Beginning After the End in its over 200 chapter run now proved itself to be more than just an isekai story. It managed to painstakingly carve out its identity with amazing characters, an interesting world and magic system, and some incredible story ideas. It proved that it was more than just power fantasy slop, and it deserved the quality befitting a show with that much set in store for it, that much potential. Instead, it got treated like every other isekai story out there, and in some regards it got even less attention and care. The animation work for the show was done by Studio ACAT. They're a pretty long-standing Japanese studio that also does some 3D work for games and commercials. And just looking at their track record, this was the expected outcome. Their catalog of TV anime adaptations run anywhere from a 5 to a 6 on a MyAnime list, with none of their shows scoring more than a 6.75. By the way, that one show that almost made it to a 7 is Battle in 5 Seconds, which used to be one of my favorite manga as an early teen, and I think could have easily been turned into an 8 or 9 out of 10 anime. So this studio clearly has a penchant for crushing my hopes and dreams in particular. Even as I say this though, I don't think it's fair to blame an entire studio and everyone involved for the work they put out. One of the biggest deciding factors on how good a show is comes down to its budget. If you look at the difference between anime shows and movies made by the same companies, the movie is almost always better due to having more time and money to be able to work on it. This isn't to say that studios like MAPPA are only good because they get more money. Obviously, some studios have specialties and exceptionally talented people. But the animators at studios like ACAT are probably amazing in what they do. You kind of have to be in order to be part of the industry. The main issue with the raw animation quality is that the beginning after the end clearly didn't get the budget it deserved. Instead of being a big-ticket adaptation with a lot of pull and power behind it, it probably got handed to Studio ACAT as a pretty low-cost project. So without enough time and money to bring the show the quality it deserved, it ended up like this. This is all pure speculation, by the way. It's possible the show had an incredibly massive budget and this is actually all on the people working in the studio. It's just that in my experience, people are often very quick to blame the studio and animators when in reality they're just kind of beholden to the amount of money and time they're given for a project. But while I am trying to defend the animators who worked on this show, there are two things that I think are absolutely inexcusable when it comes to this adaptation. The way the story was changed and how little effort was put into some parts of the show. So first off, there are a couple sizable changes to the flow of the story, and especially the character writing within it. The biggest and most noteworthy change in my opinion is how often the life of King Gray is inserted into the story. So Arthur is the reincarnated soul of King Gray, a king in his previous worlds of swords and spaceships. In the original webtoon, we got a little bit of background on King Gray's identity and past, but aside from a few panels of flashback, we didn't know all that much. Most of King Gray's life is unexplored until the later parts of the webtoon, where some elements of his past are explored and brought to light. In contrast to that, Arthur's past life is a lot more of a focus in the anime than it ever was in the webtoon. The first episode is rife with scenes showing the king in his original world and how cool and awesome he is. And the character arc Arthur goes on in the second episode is entirely kicked off with a flashback about King Gray's past. This focus on Arthur's past life even extends to the opening, where multiple shots are of Arthur's previous world. And I cannot emphasize enough how much this ruins the original story's flow and pacing. In the original webcomic, Arthur's past life is showcased during chapters 1, 2, and a lot in chapter 12. After this, aside from some mentions and references to his other world, we never see anything more about King Gray. And that works perfectly. Instead of focusing on this world we aren't in and shouldn't really care about, we get to learn about this new world that Arthur gets to grow up in. We see his reactions to things, how amazed he is by magic and sorcery, and how honestly charming he is as a character. We fully get to dive into this fantasy world along with our main character, and it makes us connect with Arthur almost immediately. On the other hand, the flow of the story in the anime is constantly interrupted and broken by these flashbacks to King Gray's life. Our attention is split into learning about his old world and this new world he finds himself in, which just makes both settings feel all the more bland and lifeless. To make things worse, King Gray is an awful person. He never does anything redeemable and is pretty much just a soulless killing machine for all of the time he's on screen. And almost in tandem with that, Arthur loses so many of his little quirks that make the first few chapters so enjoyable. Arthur has so many moments that develop his charm as a character, and you get the sense that even if he was a grizzled king in his past life, this is the real him. The person he should have been if he was given the chance to. You don't get that feeling when you watch the anime. Arthur still has some of his quirks and some of the sillier moments with him are retained, but I just hate the way the character is played. His internal dialogue is so serious and always pitched straight in a way that's just not fun. Characterizing Arthur like this, in combination with putting so much focus on his previous life, really drives home the fact that this is King Gray in a new body. We don't get to think of Arthur as a new and unique person, and that really hurts the story overall. In the original story, we get to experience the lighthearted and often silly ways that Arthur behaves because of his reincarnation. He clearly has fun doing things, and despite being a bit headstrong and willful since he's a lot older than he seems, he doesn't shy away from showing genuine curiosity and wonder at the world. On the other hand, the Arthur of the anime feels old. Even as a kid, he's jaded and a little bit boring. There's some comedy to having a grumpy old man stuck in the body of a toddler, but that's not how Arthur is characterized in the original. And I think the story loses a lot of points for having Arthur be so diminished. They try to fit these mini character arcs into the show in episodes 1 and 2, where Arthur learns the meaning of family and love, and I cannot stress enough how bad these are. Episode 2 opens with Arthur executing the wife and son of a man who tried to assassinate him. He does so in cold blood and with no signs of remorse. At the end of this episode, when Arthur thinks he is about to die, he reflects on his life and comes to the conclusion that he does actually understand why the man was sad his family was killed. And since Arthur finally has a family now, he's able to recognize that he was wrong for murdering 2 innocent people. Like, what were they going for? This plot point about King Gray finally feeling remorse is totally anime original, and they completely should not have included it. Are you seriously telling me that King Gray was such an awful person that he doesn't understand that killing somebody's innocent wife and kid in front of their eyes is a bad thing, and would make them sad? How did it take him this long as Arthur to realize what is such a simple human moral to comprehend? And I even think that this could be an interesting plot point in a different story. If the original character is like a medically diagnosed psychopath and doesn't feel any guilt for their actions and the people they hurt, it could be a fascinating story for them to be reincarnated into a mind that is capable of guilt. coming to terms with everything they did in their past life. First off, this is not at all what they are going for, and even if it was executed so terribly that it really doesn't deserve any of that credit. And regardless, this is not how things went in the webtoon. This is completely additive and fully ruins Arthur for me. There's some sympathy I can give to a character that finally realizes the error of their ways, but when the lesson learned is to not murder children, I don't care how and when you learn that lesson, you have lost my sympathy, fully and completely. If you can't tell, I'm upset with how this story was altered. I think that the way this show is made indicates a complete lack of respect for the original source material and the story it's trying to tell. And this lack of understanding is present pretty much everywhere. All of the characters feel muted and dulled down compared to the original appearances. We talked about Arthur's problems for a while, but Arthur's parents are deprived of so many of their cutest moments together. They were genuinely one of my favorite couples in Webtoon, and they turned from a believable and fun family into caricatures of themselves. The same can be said for Sylvie and the Twin Horns. Durden has such a cute and simple design, and in the original webtoon he's literally characterized as a big golden retriever man who's simple and loving and kind, and all of this is shown in his first interaction with Arthur where he smiles and pats him and gives him a thumbs up. And in the anime, none of this happens. He's a brick wall of a man and doesn't show any emotions or any degree of expression in the entirety of his first appearance. And I think that's the single biggest shame with the anime. The people who wrote the show and changed all of these things about it clearly didn't understand any of what made the original so special. I loved the slow pacing and the little character bits that happened here and there. I genuinely think that the balance between silly, fun character moments and dark, serious story beats is something really impressive about the webtoon. And it all hinges on the characters, how much focus they get, the ways in which they're depicted. The entire story slowly unravels and falls apart if you don't like these people and want to watch them succeed and thrive. This series deserved to be handled by people who cared about it. With the solo leveling adaptation, you can tell how much the people involved understand the source material. They recognize all of its strengths and weaknesses and do everything they can to push the anime forward by building on the strengths and working on the parts that could be better. That's the beauty of an adaptation. You take the essence of a story and you pass it along and watch as the idea grows and develops and becomes better for each person that touches it. But none of that same care can be seen in the anime for the beginning after the end. And there's nowhere in which that's more apparent than in the show's ending. Anime endings are for the purpose of displaying credits in full, but it's become practice to accompany this with interesting visuals and music to go along with them. And there's so much content and theming that could have been used to craft a visually interesting and creative ending. But that didn't happen. The ending of the show is a sequence of shots of Arthur running, and every so often a still frame of someone he knows will pop up. And after the still frame disappears, Arthur grows up a little bit, and keeps running. This just keeps going for the entire end credit scene. I don't think I've ever been so disappointed by a show's ending sequence. Having just come off of To Be Hero's ending sequence, one of the coolest and most striking endings I've seen in recent anime, this is possibly one of the worst showings I've seen for an ED. And the thing that makes this the most disappointing is that this wasn't an issue with the budget. This wasn't an issue with not having the resources to make something cool. This was a matter of care. This clearly demonstrates that someone in charge of this project had no idea what the original series was and how to represent it. It doesn't take a huge production to make a thought-provoking ending. One of my favorite endings of all time is the ending to the Tatami Galaxy. It's just a bunch of squares stretching and shrinking in the style of room layouts. Heck, I could probably make this in After Effects if you give me a solid week. But the thematic meaning of these rooms as a representation of people growing and changing, reflecting the way rooms and repetition are used in the show, it's a stellar ending. It's thematically appropriate and thought-provoking. Even the old ending to SAO was a single frame drawing slowly scrolling up with the credits, and I'd say that had more visual depth and style to it than the ending to Beginning After the End. You could have made it a slice-of-life ending, showing that characters were supposed to love all interacting and having fun, or a world-building ending that just shows off a bunch of cool locales and places we're going to explore. It just feels like nobody really cared, and that nobody understands what makes this story so incredible in the first place. And I just wish it wasn't so. I hope that this video doesn't result in a new wave of hate for the show or the people behind it. The author of the original web novel released a statement asking for people to respect the production despite all of its problems, and I think that's something a lot of people should listen to. I wanted to make this video as an honest critique of the show and the way the source material was handled. I think it's always a shame when something amazing is handled so poorly in a lot of ways, and to be honest, I do kind of think the lack of care is something that should be called out. If you've never read The Beginning After the End, please do. Support the people who made such an incredible story. They deserve all of the love and attention for their work. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching.